What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and this one will break down what's going on with SPY, Tesla, the QQQ, and main tickers out there. I want to talk about what's going on with the overall market, what you should be watching for moving forward, and also what data is going to be dropping very soon for today to cause some more volatility. Before I break things down with all this information, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. Check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, so when it comes to the market, we're seeing a lot of tickers that are actually red in the pre-market. Some of them are kind of green, like Tesla and NEO, but the majority of them are very flat or a little bit in the red. So I'm going to break down what's likely going to happen to many different tickers out there and talk about the news that just came out. The stock market futures are flat ahead of the key inflationary data this week, and that is going to be once again starting us off for the Q2 earnings, which are starting very, very soon. We have big bank earnings near the end of the week on Friday. And for now, earnings are going to be very, very slow, at least for the first couple of days. But don't forget, we have CPI coming out for Wednesday, and that's going to be one of the biggest catalysts for the week as well. But until then, for today, we have big data and lots of these Fed speakers basically coming out. So right now, my screen is showing 7 o'clock a.m., but this is in Pacific time. I just want to make that as clear as possible for everyone. This is Pacific time. I'm not going to go just based off this just for you guys. This means that at 10 o'clock a.m., not 7 a.m., 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, in New York time, we have Fed Bar giving a speech that is going to be 30 minutes after the market opens. Then at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, okay, right over here, we have Daly giving a speech again. So we have another Fed speaker alongside Mestra at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time in New York time. And then we also have the consumer inflationary expectations report. This is going to be very nuanced. So far, many consumers are expecting inflation to drop. Oh, so we're getting some like positive sentiment amongst many of these investors. This could be pretty decent so far, so I don't expect too much from this. And then besides that, we have Bostic giving a speech at about 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. So that's going to be very important too. Bostic has been all over the place. The guy's been very hawkish in the past, and as of recently, he's been more like dovish. So we're going to see what he causes. He tends to be one of the like most wide-spoken or one of the most wide-spoken Fed speakers that causes more volatility. So just be ready for that. And besides that, the majority of today is just going to be built around the Fed speakers. So just be ready for that. And now let's talk about all these different tickers. So on SPY, we're going to be watching this very carefully. It's very flat as of right now. It may open up very flat. I'm going to be looking for a pop, and what I'm predicting is probably going to pop up to where the 50 EMA is. We test like 440 or so. It could go a little higher. Then we're likely going to reject and start slowing down and trade very sideways. There's even a chance of downside depending on what the Fed speaker's saying. It might start to cool off a little bit, and we could see it come all the way back down to the pre-market low of 436.5 or so. Historically, there's a lot of chop around there, so be prepared for some potential chop down here in the 436s. So I think there's a good chance it's going to likely come down looking at the current trend, but just for safety, look for confirmation. That would be a break below 437 to cause that downside. All right, and if it does break below 436, you're going to be watching the 435s. Don't forget resistance is going to be around 440 and then 442 as a very important zone. Above that, we could see 443.76, but I think it's unlikely it's going to pop that high looking at the current data and how the market performed on Friday. For Tesla, it's trying to gap up just a little bit, but I'd still be very careful with this one. If Tesla starts pushing up a little higher, you're going to be watching this level right here around this 278 area, and it could reject off that and start cooling off a bit. Tesla has a tendency of popping, then dropping every morning. If you go back since the start of last week, it popped, then dropped, popped, then dropped, popped and dropped right here, popped, then dropped, and we're likely going to see a pop and drop in the morning. So just be very careful with this. Also, Tesla's starting to show some signs of weakness looking at the big gap that formed right over here. If it breaks below, the 270 support, there's a good chance Tesla will sink a little bit lower and come very close to filling the gap, if not completely fill it. Now, I believe it's going to retest 270 very soon. We just saw it touch like 271 in the pre-market and bounce after that. It still is kind of green, but it's gapping up, so don't forget there's going to be a gap below to fill if it does open like this. And I think it's going to likely pop and then continue to drop as time goes on. So what resistance to watch for? 278, 280 as resistance. If it breaks down, watch 275, 272, 270, and then 268 as supports. I think it's going to pop to about 277 to 278 or so, then end up dropping come down to 275, maybe even lower than that, and start continuing to downtrend a little bit more because the overall trend is starting to look weaker on Tesla. It's slowly declining. It's been declining for the last 3 days, last 4 trading days, if anything. And I would just be very careful with it. Now for Aapl, I'd also be careful with this. This is also declining just a bit. It's kind of down in the pre-market, showing a little bit of weakness. It's currently at about 189 a share. It's going to be testing 190's resistance. Going to be looking for a small pop, maybe a 191 retest going into today, then maybe a drop afterwards, and some very sideways price action on Aapl. With the overall trends looking a little bit weaker on it, you can see Apple's been making lower highs for the last couple of days. There's a chance Apple's going to come all the way down to like 187.5 or so, or even like lower than that. I'm thinking it's going to pop just like the market, right? It's going to help the market pop a bit before it's cooling down just slowly and making its way down to lower levels. 190, then 191 are going to be resistances, and then 192. If it breaks down, watch 188.5, 187.5, 186.5, and then 186 flats and 185, all as supports on Aapl as this thing declines most likely over the next couple of trading days. Now, don't forget we have CPI on Wednesday. That's going to be very impactful as well. But anyways, I'm just talking about the current trends. For the triple Q, this one is looking a little bit weaker too. You can see it got rejected off 372 and is currently a little bit down in the pre-market. Now, what's good about it is it had this cup and handle like formation, still kind of has it. So I'm still going to be like double-minded when looking at it. There's a possible cup and handle forming, but at the same time, you could argue that it failed to complete this like inverse head and shoulders, and it's slowing down a bit. But if we ignore the inverse head and shoulders and just look at the current trend, it has been technically making lower highs and lower lows. If you just look at the trend for the last 4 or 5 days, that's the trend that's going on right now. So it could continue to decline, and the trend is suggesting that on the shorter time frames. So I'd still be very careful with this. With that said, this thing may pop to about this like 367 area, 368 or so, then reject off that and start coming down to 366, 364.69, 363 as support. If that fails us, there's 362 and 360 all the way down there. Now, we also have resistance at 368, 370, 372.5. So watch those levels very carefully. I think it's going to pop then drop anyways. Nvidia is holding up a little bit better after some bullish news involving Janet Yellen that came out, and also like some more new price upgrades from analysts for Nvidia. I think it was Morgan Stanley, I believe it was that one, and many other analysts that are upgrading Nvidia. So there's a good chance Nvidia is going to outperform the market and hold up nicely. Also, I like the fact that it has this nice inverse head and shoulders right here, and it may try to pop a little bit higher because it's getting lots of price upgrades from many investors because of some strong guidance. So we could see this thing try to retest the resistance around 435. If that breaks, watch 440 on it to complete this inverse head and shoulders. But if it ends up breaking down later on, support's going to be at 418, 416, 413.5, and then 409. I think it's going to try to pop a little bit. It might try to keep going because of some very bullish news. With news coming out, it's a little hard to predict, but I think it might try to get a pop to at least 435, hopefully. Hopefully it tries to pop a little bit, and then this thing starts cooling off after that. It could go all the way up to like 440, but just to be safe, we're just going to be very careful at these levels because it still would be completing the inverse head and shoulders and could reject off this zone all the way up here anyways. So just watch it carefully. I'm going to be looking for a small pop near the open. Could try to outperform the market because of the good news, but always be careful. Now for Microsoft, you could argue that Microsoft has like a double top like formation potential, like head and shoulders forming, but so far it still was holding up quite nicely. It is now starting to gap down in the pre-market. If it tries to pop, you're going to be watching for it to try to fill this gap at like 337 and then reject. That's a possibility, but it's starting to look weaker. I broke down yesterday how we have to watch the 15 to 200. That's going to determine the direction of this thing is breaking below the 200, which is a bearish signal. So we watch for a backtest of like 337, maybe rejection after that, and for Microsoft to drop all the way down these lower levels around like the 330 area to 328 or so. That becomes more possible as it's looking kind of weak in the pre-market. AMD is a little green after the Janet Yellen news. It's still holding up nicely, but it's very flat. So I'm going to be expecting this to be a little sideways. It could try to pop a little bit to this like 115 level. If it manages to break that, there's that imbalance all the way up to like 118. That becomes more possible, but just to be safe, I'm going to be looking for a small pop to like 115, then a rejection after that. If it starts rejecting, support is going to be around this 110 area, 110 to 111, 107 after that, then 105. I'm leaning in the direction of this thing popping a little bit and getting a rejection, and we'll see what happens from there. Finally, the same thing could be said about Meta. It is popping in the pre-market. It's showing some strength as it typically does, but we're going to be watching how does Meta react to 295. 298, and then 300. I don't think it's going to break 300 today unless we get some bullish news. So far, it's not really coming out. We're going to be watching this resistance right now as it's trying to pop right now. I think it's going to try to pop a little bit, retest 295 or so, maybe a little bit higher, and then this thing may reject and just trade very flat. That's what I'm predicting for Meta. Very sideways close, nothing too bad. But eventually, what I think is going to happen is it might pop, then drop and trade sideways. But eventually, I see over the next few days, it could start to drop down to this imbalance down here around this like 287 area. So it may pop, then drop, and end up coming down there. All right, guys. So anyways, I went over the majority of the tickers. So watch support and resistance very carefully. Do what you have to do, and just be prepared for more volatility because of the Fed speakers. All right. Have a very, very awesome day, everyone. Have a great day trading. The market to the moon. The long term is very bright. And peace out.